she's staring at.
Okay, so the nagging naggy is an annoyance, but the obnoxious button prompts are just fine. Okay, whatever. I've got nothing. Next. Angry Video Game Nerd 1 and 2 Deluxe Edition, released in 2020 for various modern platforms at the time. We're looking at the Nintendo Switch version for today's subject matter, and really playing a game based on someone who started off as the angry Nintendo nerd on a Nintendo system seemed somewhat appropriate. So this is a compilation pack of 2 previously released video games. Angry Video Game Nerd Adventures, originally released in 2013, and Angry Video Game Nerd 2 Simulation, originally released in 2016. The package also includes a third bonus game called Tower of Torment, newly created for the Deluxe Edition, and is only available to play once you've completed the first 2 games. And how appropriate this would come out in 2020, a year where people had more than enough time to play all the shitty games in the world, and frankly, if that's all people did at the time, we would all be far better off, but I digress. So what necessitates the Deluxe Edition moniker of this package is that both nerd games have undergone the remastered treatment. There's quips in the game that actually make light of this. This basically means they redid the graphics, the sound, and the gameplay to be a bit more consistent across the border, tweaked a few things here and there, replaced a few things here and there, and perhaps most notable of all, they rebalanced the overall difficulty of the easy and normal settings so that it would be more tolerable than before. This generally means a reduction in death blocks, those things that would blink in and out of existence to kill you instantly if you touched them. Instead, some of them are replaced with spiked balls that merely damage you instead of kill you outright, which should ease the pain somewhat but not by much. You also get infinite lives, which provides a bit of a cushion for the player to try the level without fear of getting a game over. Though if you prefer to keep things old school, limited lives and original death blocks and all, you certainly have that option and then some from the get-go, and more than enough save slots to share the misery with. In a way, I'm sort of glad I went back and played those original versions before diving into this one, because I noticed they changed a couple levels around. Nerd Gaiden 1 in the original Simulation had a few more working bits to it, while the deluxe version is a much more simplified version of the same stage, and I think this also applies to the higher difficulties as well. They also ditched one of the bosses of the first game, the Ponycorn, Unicorn, whatever it's called, and they replaced it with the Bloodstein Bears. You know, oh man, 4 years later they still haven't fixed that typo? That's fucking embarrassing. Everyone knows it's Bloodstein with an E, not an A. Dumbass. The first game, released 7 years prior to this deluxe version, which makes it 10 years old, obviously got the most remastered changes out of the bunch. Most notable is the overall presentation. The graphics and text boxes have been overhauled to match the colors and stylings of the second game, which I generally don't care for. I prefer the brighter, cleaner look of the original version, though I will admit that a couple levels do benefit a little from the changeover. There's also some background changes here and there. Gameplay has also seen some tweaks here. Besides a new boss, some levels have been changed around in design, and it's not just swapping some death blocks for spike balls and lower difficulties. All the hidden internet cameos from other internet personalities have been replaced with appearances from Future Nerd, who will provide you with power-ups from the second game, such as temporary spread shots and F-bombs. Beer kegs also replace extra lives in easier difficulties, and the stone weapon that was originally a big old joke in the first game has been tweaked to be more like the second game's rebound stone, which still has that arc but bounces off a couple things a couple times to make it slightly useful. They ditched the nerd death quips to speed up the respawning process, which I really didn't mind the first time around, but they added in nerd cards from the second game for you to collect, which, if you collect them all across all 3 games, unlocks the Justin Bailey skin, which is exactly what it says on the tin, but you do get a permanent spread shot, which is nice. There are also Board James and Rex Viper skins to unlock that exist, and that's all I'll really say on that count. The second game,
This game is diarrhea.
Simulation at first doesn't deviate all that much from the original version, but some levels have seen some tweaks here and there, a couple of which have been massively overhauled in addition to the usual replacing of death blocks, so it's a whatever, and additional background elements here and there like the kaiju fight and the Nerd Gaiden levels. It's stuff you notice here and there if you're familiar with both versions. The game also made some changes to its roster of sorts. Any and all references to the Angry Video Game Nerd movie were ditched, so certain characters are replaced with similar equivalents who play pretty much the same role, and you even have quotes referencing these changes. The Nostalgia Critic has been replaced with Fred Fox, who now resembles the character as played by the late Gilbert Gottfried in that one episode. The Sex Force has been replaced with a Flux Capacitor, which serves the same function, but I don't know. I think Sex Force is a better name, and I can't imagine any other situation where that would be the case, but Once you've completed the first two games, you'll unlock the third and final game, Tower of Torment. And it's just a short extension of the second game with 3 new levels and a boss fight. The levels themselves feature a mix of enemies from the previous games, along with some new challenges to overcome, but really nothing out of the ordinary. At least by the standards of this universe. Honestly, this is less new game and more of an expansion pack to the existing nerd product. Just a little something extra to make the collection worthwhile to those who already have the first 2 games. Extremely little, but I digress. And that's Angry Video Game Nerd 1 and 2 Deluxe in a nutshell. And for the most part, the games play as they did originally, barring some changes here and there, some of which I've listed here, others I may have missed. The rebalanced easy and normal settings help to make the game a bit more palatable for some players, and the infinite lives instituted in these modes helps to spread the misery out a little while longer. Fucking Virtual Boy. Control is fairly tight, even the wall jumping feels a little better here than it did originally in the second game. Overall performance holds up fairly well, even with all the jibs flying around. And again, your mileage is going to vary on a lot of things with this game. The visual style, the overall challenge, the somewhat crude humor, but for me, I think it's alright. I do miss the death quips, but I get why some people would be annoyed by them after a while. Sound is the same as before, the 8-bit sounding NES-style sound effects and the same music, the same chiptune music that they used before, though they did tweak the AVGN theme to sound more complete, more lyrical. Tower of Torment has its own musical tracks, and they're fine. Not much else to say there, they're fine. Not quite up to the standards of the first 2 games, which had some great chiptunes, but this is just fine. They're not terrible or anything like that. I really got nothing to say in that regard. It's just a throwaway thing, and they'll do throwaway tracks and whatever. Overall, Angry Video Game Nerd 1 and 2 Deluxe, 2 fine games and a bonus mini-game of sorts for the price of 1. Not a bad package deal for the console side of things. The games themselves got some nice convenient tweaks to make the experience slightly more palatable, but are otherwise the same great games as before. Perfectly fine release for the console players, certainly a more convenient package for those who haven't played the original versions, but for those who have played the first 2 games and are still on the fence with this updated version, because those people do exist, I'd say it's worth checking out as there's enough changes here and there to justify a revisit, unless you absolutely hated those first 2 games, in which case, I don't think it'll make much of a difference, but your mileage may vary. In any event, the games hold up just fine.